the chat to see if we have a winner. Okay, I see Miss Rose and Nikki Rose said she found 13 words. All right. Let me look on YouTube if I missed anybody. All right, I see that the YouTube isn't up as yet. The streaming isn't up. Mistress Lloyd, should I go ahead with a winner? Although the YouTube isn't up.
We will verify the winner at the end, Miss Brown. You may just hand over to the moderator.
Okay, no problem. All right. So for this session, our moderator is Dr. Salisha Mohammed, and she is one of our members from the USN St. Augustine School. So she will take over from now, Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Just to make a correction, I'm not from USN. I am from one of our schools of medicine here in Trinidad, but not at USN. Okay. Ms. Cheryl Garrix-Lloyd, President of Omega Kappa Chapter. Ms. Alia Brown, Vice President. Chapter members, participants, and students, good afternoon, and welcome to our 4th session on Omega Kappa Infection Control webinar series. My name is Salisha Mohammed, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Thus far, we have had 6 very informative and educational presentations which focused on microorganisms, multi-drug resistant organisms, isolation and precaution, hand and body hygiene, high-level disinfection, and sterilization. Those of you who were not able to join us for those presentations and would like to do so, you can find the recordings on YouTube by searching for Omega Kappa Infection Control webinar series. In today's session, we will be looking at 2 pertinent and stimulating topics, which are food safety and the role of nutrition in infection prevention. Our presenters for this afternoon are Ms. Melisha Allen and Ms. Donette Allen. Alicia Wright. Just a few reminders before we begin. If you have joined us on YouTube, please remember to write your full name in the chat so we can have a record of your attendance. We will have both presentations and then the question and answer segment where we would facilitate your questions. In keeping with our virtual platform etiquette, if you are on Zoom, please remember to mute your microphone until the question and answer segment. And if you have any questions or comments during that segment, please use the raised hand icon and we will acknowledge you or write your answers or your questions in the chat. For our participants on YouTube, please write your question in the chat and we will also acknowledge those so that they can be answered. So our first topic for this afternoon is on the role of nutrition in infection prevention, which will be presented by Mrs. Donette Alicia Wright. Mrs. Donette Alicia Wright describes herself as a dedicated, creative professional who takes great pride in achieving coordinated goals in life. She is passionate about community work and helping unattached youths to achieve a better quality of life. She claimed because she is disciplined, focused, and studious, she earned her graduate and postgraduate degrees in nursing and nutrition before she was 25 years of age, despite her socioeconomic challenges. She is a graduate of Glenmuir High School and the University of the West Indies, earning summa cum laude in her undergraduate degree and several other honors. Mrs. Wright is a registered nurse for over 13 years with experience in perioperative and oncology nursing. She currently lectures at the University of the West Indies School of Nursing, Mona campus. She has been teaching nutrition and diet therapy to undergraduate nursing students for more than 10 years and collaborates to teach graduate students public health nutrition. Her role in academia also includes graduate research supervision and undergraduate and blended learning facilitation in adult education. She's currently reading for her PhD in nursing. In February 2021, she completed her PhD oral examination and is now adjusting her thesis for formal award. She has published many research papers and has authored 3 books on nutrition and education and a book chapter on nutrition in secondary care settings. She has earned several awards, including the Grace Community Volunteerism Award in 2001 and the Governor General's Award for Excellence in 2017. She was also nominated and shortlisted for the Prime Minister's Youth Award after completing her BSc. She worked with Nestle Nutrition Jamaica between 2012 and 2018 and was a judge at Nestle Wellness Fiesta, which served to promote and encourage healthy eating and wellness among children across the island. Mrs. Wright also volunteered with the Rotary Club of New Kingston to provide nutrition, public health, and nursing services to individuals of low-income communities. She is a member of the Lay Magistrates Association of Jamaica and the Governor General's I Believe Initiative National Leadership Cohort. She is the Justice of the Peace for Kingston since 2019 and serves as an executive member of the PTA of Adine Preparatory and Extension High School. So please help us welcome Mrs. Wright to do her presentation.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Dr. Mohammed. I am going to share my screen so I can continue my presentation momentarily. So it is my pleasure to start off today's 6th presentation in the Omega Kappa webinar series. My topic for this afternoon will relate to nutrition and infectious disease. We will be speaking primarily about the role of nutrition in infectious disease prevention. Before we examine nutrition in its entirety, I would first like to provide an overview of the importance and significance of nutrition. There is a cyclical relationship between nutrition and infectious disease. The nutritional status of an individual, as well as their dietary intake, will influence their immunity because of the supply of substrates to support immune function, including substrates such as micronutrients and macronutrients that will fuel the activity of the immune system. Malnutrition, therefore, is inversely proportional to immune response, which means that as malnutrition becomes worse or is greater, the worse your immune response or the lower your immune response. The length, the extent, the severity, and the extent to which infections recur will affect the nutritional status of an individual, where it is that longer, more severe, and repeated quality of infections will be directly related to the severity of malnutrition. Therefore, if an individual is consistently ill and severely ill, then their nutritional status, including their micronutrient status, may be significantly affected. In this presentation, we will examine both how nutritional intake influences your immune function, as well as how immunity will influence your nutritional status. Currently, the leading causes of global death are significantly associated with nutritional status. Many of our top 10 causes of death are associated with non-communicable diseases, which have a nexus in nutritional and dietary intake. Among these non-communicable diseases, the top 10 causes of death globally in 2019 were ischemic heart disease, stroke, and lower respiratory infections, especially in children. Notably, ischemic heart disease and stroke have an association that is directly linked to the intake of macronutrients, particularly fat and carbohydrates. The data has shown that particularly in children under 5 years of age, their micronutrient status is directly related to the risk and outcomes associated with lower respiratory tract infections. Conversely, our data is suggesting that dietary intake can influence the incidence of non-communicable diseases. As we examine children in particular, what we found is that in children, particularly those younger than 5 years of age, more than half of their deaths are associated with malnutrition. So while the diseases and the causes of death are not directly stated as malnutrition, the data is suggesting that these diseases, these conditions, including diarrheal disease, respiratory illnesses, measles, malaria, and others, have a direct impact from the nutritional and dietary intake, the nutritional status and the dietary intake of children. We now examine what is called an interaction between nutrition and immunity. On the one hand, one element or one end of the spectrum of nutrition is undernutrition. So nutrition exists on a spectrum from being well nourished to being undernourished. And in this instance, undernutrition is the element of nutrition that we are examining. Undernutrition influences and impacts the body by limiting or decreasing immune function, both innate and acquired immunity. And in so doing, it increases the risk of infection. When infection occurs, it is likely to also influence and worsen undernutrition. So the relationship between undernutrition and infection is cyclical in that way. As an individual experiences infection, there are direct dietary changes that exist, particularly with digestion and absorption. When there is infection, whether it is that is systemic or localized, there may be impairments in the body's ability to absorb micro and macronutrients. There is alteration in the lumen of the intestines, which will directly impact on the amount and the quality of the absorption process, as well as there may be mucosal injury that affects both digestion and absorption. These factors will worsen undernutrition, and as undernutrition worsens, the risk of infection also worsens. This is another cyclical model that speaks to the relationship between infection and malnutrition. Similar to the model that you saw just now, this model explains that in the face of inadequate dietary intake, malabsorption and malnutrition may occur. In the first instance, as this decreased dietary intake occurs, an individual may experience weight loss. They may also, if they are in teenage years and growth is still occurring, they may experience growth faltering. And certainly even as adults, you may experience lowered immunity as the substrates that are necessary to support immunity is lessened through dietary intake. When these situations occur, it increases the incidence, meaning the rate at which we get infection, as well as the severity, how bad the infection is, and the length of time an individual experiences an infection. As these conditions exist, what it does, it also influences and affects appetite or diet through the following means. As you undergo an infection, your appetite falls and the amount that you consume will also fall. As described before, infection can directly affect the processes of absorption by limiting the absorptive capacity in the gut lumen and also limiting the body's ability to absorb particularly micronutrients. As we go through the presentation, I will provide for you more details about the importance of some micronutrients in infection prevention, control, and recovery. COVID-19 is one of the topical infections that we are seeing at this time. And I'd like to use this presentation to bring this condition into focus. Particularly as it relates to nutrition, we examine this model of how nutrition can in fact affect the severity and the symptomatic reactions with respect to COVID-19. In individuals who have inadequate dietary intake, when they are faced with an antigen such as the viruses of COVID-19 coronavirus, the individual will or may exhibit inadequate immune response because those markers such as IgG and others may be limited in their production when dietary intake is low. When this happens, the individual is at increased susceptibility to infections, particularly viral infection in this model when we look at COVID-19, and therefore the individual becomes symptomatic of the disease. And in those individuals, particularly those with low dietary status or poor nutritional status, the infection may be more severe. This is another model that is described by Moraz, which speaks to the relationship between COVID-19 and nutrition. These are specific markers that are important in COVID-19. Notably, some of the factors that are listed here are micronutrients. So they speak to micronutrients, including vitamins like vitamin A, which is retinol, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and then they also mention some minerals, including zinc, iron, and selenium. It also speaks to obesity and the impact obesity can have in increasing your susceptibility to COVID-19. This is because obesity is thought to increase some of the markers that are pro-inflammatory cytokines, including interleukin 1, IL, interleukin 6, tissue necrosis factor alpha, and also in individuals who are obese, they are leptin resistant and they have increased the risk of inflammation. These factors together worsens your susceptibility for COVID-19 and increases the severity of the disease you may have when you are obese. Furthermore, individuals may have impaired immune response, and these may be contributory factors to impaired immune response. Unbalanced diet, malnutrition, and obesity. And the particular things about malnutrition that worsens your risk of COVID-19 includes increased adiponectin, which is thought to increase the risk of inflammatory responses, increased interleukin 10, decreased tissue necrosis factor alpha, and decreased interleukin 6. We are going to be speaking about the role of the immune system in a little bit more detail and how that interrelates with dietary intake. But before we are to examine the immune system, I'd just like to review for you the role of immunity and the different arms of immunity that the human being has. We're going to speak specifically to acquired immunity. I'm sure that we all remember that immunity is in two parts: innate immunity and acquired immunity. Or innate immunity is what we get naturally as we are born. That's not the one that we're particularly concerned with as we speak to nutrition and nutritional status. The one that is of most importance to us is acquired immunity. This is the immunity that develops during our lifetime. Acquired immunity is subdivided into active immunity and passive immunity. We're concerned with both. With respect to active active immunity, which nutrition will influence a lot, this develops in response to an infection or vaccine. It can be both natural or artificial. With respect to natural, the individual will have exposure to a particular antigen, and the antibodies will develop in response to that infection. Simply by, for instance, coming in contact with an individual who has the common cold, you would have active immunity. With respect to artificial immunity, an individual may be exposed to a vaccine and they develop the antibodies to the response of the T cell and the B cell system. That humoral and as well as cell-mediated immunity will cause the cell formats. With respect to passive immunity through breastfeeding, so these antibodies are pre-made and they get it naturally from another human, such as their mother. In articles, gamma glam
done it.
If an individual is exposed to a sleep, where the body itself, yes.
Sorry about that. We weren't hearing you just now. You were going in and out.
Oh, I apologize. I hope it is my wish to describe here different types of immunity.
You are still breaking up, Mr.
And this slide is intended on, bring me more clearly now. Is it better now?
No.
Or I wasn't speaking just now, I'm speaking now. This is the discussion I wanted to have about the different types of acquired immunity. The point of this slide is to provide a review of the different forms of immunity, so that as I describe the role of nutrition in immunity, a direct link can be made. I am hoping that you're now hearing me clearly and I can proceed from here.
Yes, we are hearing you. I am hearing you clearly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed. So our intent now is to make this linkage between nutrition and immunity, having just provided a review as to the different types of immunity that exists. And we're primarily concerned with acquired immunity. There is a synergy, which is a special relationship between infection and immunity, where poor states in either. So if you have a poor state of infection or a poor state of immunity, there is a worsened outcome in infection if immunity is low, and a poor state of this information should have spoken to immunity and nutrition. So if nutritional status is low, then the immune response is also low. If it is that immune responses are, if there's high levels of infection, then the nutritional status may also be low. The World Health Organization reported that infection could worsen malnutrition in humans. Infection may negatively influence nutritional status, resulting in a reduction in the ability to fight the infection, consequently worsening the infection or the length of time and the symptoms that the individual experiences. Infection can cause malnutrition, and malnutrition can increase the incidence and severity of infection. Let's speak particularly to the role of micronutrient status in infection. So we know that nutritionally, there are two major groups that foods are grouped in. They're grouped as micronutrients or macronutrients. Macronutrients are foods that will provide us with energy, and it is needed in large quantities for dietary support daily. Micronutrients are needed in smaller quantities, and they provide for us the fuel and the substrates that are necessary to break down the macronutrients, as well as to provide physiological well-being to the humans. So we're going to speak particularly to micronutrients for the next few slides or so. Micronutrients are thought collectively to improve antioxidant capacity. They also influence inflammatory response. Some of them increase inflammatory response, and others limit and restrict inflammatory response. Both of these actions are necessary to maintain homeostasis in the body. Other micronutrients influence immunology through their actions on both the humoral, the cellular, and the non-specific immune responses. Key micronutrients that are involved in improving immune function include ascorbic acid, vitamin D, vitamin E, zinc, selenium, and copper, and B vitamins, including thiamine B1, riboflavin, pantothenic acid, and pyridoxine. And we will look at these in detail as we progress. Our first point, iron deficiency, according to Hassan, iron deficiency anemia is associated with lower levels of immunoglobulin, IgG levels, as well as interleukin-6 levels, as well as impacting phagocytic activity by lowering phagocytic activity when anemia is present, and it are important cells in the non-specific responses in the immune cascade. Furthermore, iron deficiency anemia is thought to be more significant in children, affecting both morbidity and mortality rates, where it is that children who experience iron deficiency anemia have higher rates of infection and higher risk of death. We now examine copper and immunity. Copper deficiency is associated with reductions in interleukin in the activity of the T cell proliferation. And if we are to recall immunity, we know that the T cells are important in the cell-mediated responses when an individual faces an antigen and must mount an immune response. This therefore means that there is also reduced innate immune functions and the body's capacity to handle an invading antigen. There is also increased risk of infection when copper levels are low. Notably, each of the pictures to the right of our slides provide for you exemplars of data resources of the nutrients that are being examined. For instance, in the current slide that we're looking at, which examines and speaks to the link between selenium and immunity, we find that broccoli, nuts, garlic, and fruits like apples are good sources of selenium. Selenium is thought to be a potent antioxidant, which will limit redox reactions and regulate reactive oxygen species. These are important in immune response. One of the things that reactive oxygen species does and pro-oxidants do, they damage the lining of cells, the cell surfaces, and as they do so, they may affect cells, including B and T cells. When that happens, they limit the response of the cellular cell-mediated response to an invading antigen. However, in the presence of adequate selenium, the cell surfaces are protected so that they are able to carry out their immune function. So selenium at optimal levels positively affects immunity and inflammation, but selenium deficiency has been negatively linked to reduced actions of the immune system, immune cells during activation, differentiation, and proliferation. With respect to zinc and immunity, zinc is another mineral that is important in the function.
I'm sorry to disturb you. I just got some feedback from YouTube. It's still a little bit not sounding clear, so maybe if you're able to maybe turn your video off, that would help with the bandwidth. Sorry about that.
Sure, let me just give me some feedback at the end of this slide whether you're hearing me better. So we are now going to be discussing the role of zinc and the link between zinc and immunity. I was saying earlier that zinc is another micronutrient that is important in immune response. So zinc affects the immune system in multiple ways, and zinc is also described as an antioxidant. So vitamins A, C, E, and zinc are described for the normal development and functioning of cells in the innate immunity. It is critical for the action of the natural killer cells and neutrophils, as well as the activity of macrophages. They are affected by the zinc status of an individual. Activities include phagocytosis, intracellular killing, and cytokine productions are affected by zinc levels. And when it is that an individual experiences zinc deficiency, these activities may be downregulated. Could you please tell me if the feed and the quality is better now?
I will just let you know as soon as I've gotten the feedback. Thank you.
Sure. So we now examine vitamin A and immunity. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin, and it's of two forms, preformed vitamin A and provitamin A. Preformed vitamin A is the active form of vitamin, retinol, while provitamin A is inactive form of vitamin A that needs to be activated before it can carry out its physiological functioning. Examples of provitamin A include beta-carotene. Now, vitamin A plays an important role in the development of the immune system and plays regulatory role in cellular immune responses, as well as the humoral immune processes. Vitamin A helps to protect the epithelium, and we know that the barrier the immune system also, the barrier of the immune system, when it is intact of the body, it also provides some amount of control with respect to infection. Vitamin A also protects mucous integrity, and it is also known as an anti-inflammation vitamin. Vitamin A is also described as a key antioxidant in protecting the integrity of cell surfaces that are important in immune response. Vitamin C is also a potent antioxidant. It is a water-soluble vitamin, and it is a cofactor in the biosynthetic process and in gene regulatory enzymes. Vitamin C contributes to immune defense by supporting cellular functions of both the innate as well as the adaptive immune system. That's important in managing antigens that individuals face. Vitamin C supports the epithelial barrier function against pathogen and supports phagocytosis, and it provides oxidant scavenging activity for the skin and reduces environmental oxidative stress. With respect to vitamin D, cholecalciferol modulates both the innate and the adaptive immune system. Deficiencies in vitamin D is associated with increased autoimmunity as well as increased susceptibility to infections. In one particular study, an individual had found that individuals with low vitamin D levels had a higher risk of rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition. With respect to vitamin E and immunity, vitamin E is a potent, it's called tocopherol, and vitamin E is a potent lipid-soluble antioxidant found in higher concentration in immune cells and is thought to be effective in modulating immune function. Vitamin E directly affects T cell activity, and therefore it will have an impact on cell-mediated immunity. It will also impact signal transduction, cell division, and inflammatory processes. Now, what we've discussed just now has a relationship between nutrition with nutrition and infection that is complex. On screen is a complex model that describes the link between various portions of the immune response system and dietary intake. Fiber, which was not mentioned in detail, has a role to play in inflammation and the integrity of the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. And we also know that the gastrointestinal tract is an important non-specific barrier that helps to prevent immunity. We've not described as well phenolics. So you have, for instance, when you consume wines and other vegetable, a phenolic acid that helps to support immune response by modifying virus replication and managing the immune process. We've spoken about oxidative stress and the impact oxidative stress can have on damaging the cells of the body, including immune cells. What you have are some antioxidant, potent antioxidant that is going to reduce the effect of oxidative stress and therefore protect these cells so that they can function better in supporting immune responses. Some of the micronutrients that affect and support oxidative response include vitamin E, tocopherol, vitamin C, ascorbic acid, and beta carotene here is a representation of vitamin A. Antioxidant activities also are supported by selenium and zinc. And we've also spoken about the role of different nutrients, including iron, which will influence how the immune system works. In our discussion so far, we've spoken primarily of micronutrients, but we have not described in detail any macronutrients. Importantly, we have three proteins are thought to be one of the most important elements that supports immune response, providing many of the amino acids that are going to be substrates for the development of antibodies, including IgG and IgA. While it is that protein is very important to the immune response, we also need fats and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are going to be important in making some of the molecules that are necessary for immune response, but carbohydrates is also important in supplying energy. The processes of immunity will mean that things like a fever, increasing your body temperature is going to be one of the processes that the body undergoes in order to fight an antigen. Additional energy from carbohydrates, protein, and fat would be required in order to support the processes of hyperthermia. So both your macro and micronutrients are critical components to immune response. What therefore is the effect of infection or immunity on dietary intake? So we've been speaking a lot about how dietary intake influences and supports immune response. But the reverse is also true, that infection can affect dietary intake. In what way? Well, despite the severity, all infections can decrease nutrient intake and increase nutrient losses, which means that an individual's nutritional status can be affected by the infection an individual has, whether it is severe or mild. Nutrient losses can occur because there is decreased intestinal absorption. So some of the instances when there are infections, the brush borders, which are the lining of the intestines, are unable to produce enzymes that are necessary to break down macronutrients, which means that macronutrients will pass through the gastrointestinal tract unabsorbed. Furthermore, there may be direct loss of nutrients through the intestines because some infection may precipitate diarrhea and vomiting. And when that happens, the body's ability to absorb those nutrients will be directly affected. Furthermore, there may be internal diversion of metabolic responses to infection. So I was explaining earlier about infection as fever as one of the immune response activities. When that happens, what might happen is that macronutrients, including glucose and amino acids, are shunted to the side to facilitate that process of hypothermia. So the body's ability to utilize glucose would be limited because of the diversion of those nutrients to support that metabolic processes. Furthermore, a concept called basal metabolic rate, or BMR, is increased when fever is present. So BMR is just the currency of energy that an individual experiences as the body conducts or gets involved in different physiological activity. Because the process of immunity is physiologically expensive, it uses energy and other things, it means that your basal metabolic rate would be higher, and so you have additional losses, particularly here of energy. Infection, therefore, influences not only protein and energy status, but it will influence most nutrients, including micronutrients, as we've described before. We also need to examine, infection and immunity on dietary intake. So the clinical importance of these consequences, those that I listed before, on infection depends on, first, the premorbid status of the individual. So when you speak to the relationship between immunity and infection, An individual's nutritional status before they become infected with an antigen or a virus, whatever invading organism, will determine how quickly the body will respond and produce or mount an immune response. And it will also speak to the symptomatic response of the individual as well. So not only how the infection will pathophysiologically affect the body, but as well as the symptoms that the individual will demonstrate. So the nature and duration of the infection will also impact on the dietary status. So we speak first about nutritional status impacting on the quality of the infection, and we speak about as well the infection affecting the dietary status or nutritional status of the individual. And then the diet of the individual during the infection will also speak to the types of symptoms that the individual exhibits. In industrialized countries, particular attention must be paid to the nutrition of hospitalized patients, since they are frequently debilitated by their primary disease, the morbidity that they experience, and their nutritional status. So if it is that we can control and manage dietary intake while an individual is hospitalized or experiencing an infection, we may be able to manage outcomes such as morbidity, length of infection, length of hospital stay, and in the worst case scenario, control for mortality. Morbidity and mortality are increased by nosocomial infection, those that are caught in the hospital spaces or in healthcare facilities, to which poorly nourished individuals are more susceptible. How then do we correct or improve nutritional status and lower the risk of infection and improve immunity in individuals? Our first port of call is to ensure that there are routine checks, including biochemical and clinical status checks. So these checks include a nutrition screening profile, which includes assessing micronutrient profiles. So iron levels can be assessed, zinc levels can be assessed. All of those micronutrients that are important in immunity can be assessed through nutrition screening profiles. An individual is thought whether or not they appear healthy. It is important that annual checkups be done for those individuals. And these checkups not only include a physical assessment of the individual, but also anthropometric checks, which are checks of the body parameters, such as checking body mass index, checking body weight, checking fat mass and fat-free mass, especially since there's a link between obesity and the risk of inflammatory diseases, and as well as the severity of conditions like COVID-19. There's also an important role that nutritional screening and dietary assessment plays. So nutritional screenings are short and a synopsis and an analysis of an individual's risk of nutritional deficiency. It is usually done when an individual has presents to a facility and there is a suspicion. When screening is unearthed, it may require that a nutritional assessment, which is a detailed examination of the individual, be done. Dietary assessment is a little bit different from screening, from nutritional screening, where dietary assessment looks at an evaluation of the dietary intake, the foods that and nutrients that an individual is consuming. That is important, especially if the individual is presenting with risks or signs and symptoms, so that corrections can be made to improve dietary status and nutritional status. Medical assessment and diagnosis is also an important and critical component in managing the risk of infection. Now, some conditions that are chronic may worsen outcomes for acute illnesses. For instance, individuals who have diabetes mellitus have worsened risks to many other acute illnesses. So while diabetes is described as a chronic illness, individuals who have that diagnosis have higher risk to many acute illnesses. And therefore, medical assessment and diagnosis is an important port of call in managing and assisting in managing the risk of infection. Biochemical and clinical examination of infections are also an important component in the management of infection risk and improving immunity. So when you have an infection, doing things like a complete blood count, assessing the type of infection that the individual is having, these assessments will help to guide the type of discussions that individuals can have concerning dietary strategies to improve immune function and recovery. Now, on a general basis, whether or not an individual is ill, balanced nutrition has an important role to play in maintaining nutritional status. How does an individual achieve balanced nutritional intake? They achieve it through 5 basic principles: adequacy, variety, calorie control, moderation, and nutrient density. Adequacy is a system where an individual consumes enough energy, macronutrients, to meet their physical demands for their basal metabolic rate as well as their activity. Variety is a principle where an individual consumes food from varying sources and varying preparation methods to ensure that a range of both macro and micronutrients are consumed so that nutritional status can be maintained. Calorie control is a principle in which you manage the amount of energy, especially as you look at fats and carbohydrates. Calorie control means that there is a management of the total amount of energy that is consumed daily so that excess isn't consumed and overweight and obesity isn't a risk, as well as too little isn't consumed so that undernutrition exists. Moderation particularly speaks to the intake of simple sugars, and sodium, especially as they relate to the development of chronic non-communicable diseases. And nutrient density is a principle in which an individual consumes a single food type that has the greatest amount and greatest supply of micronutrients for the smallest amount of energy. When these principles are taken together, then an individual can achieve balanced dietary intake and have appropriate nutritional status. Furthermore, in improving and lowering nutritional or infection risk, an individual should follow some recommendations, including the recommended dietary allowance represented as RDA and food-based dietary guidelines represented by FBDGs. So each of your macronutrients, for instance, is related to or relates to something called an acceptable macronutrient distribution range. For instance, when you consume food daily, 60% of what you consume as energy should come from carbohydrates. That is a part of your recommended dietary allowances. Now, there are different allowances. Iron has allowances, sodium has allowances, calcium has allowances. For instance, the allowance for calcium is 1 gram per day. And there are different sources that are told that you can utilize to meet those recommendations. And your food-based dietary guidelines help you to do that. In Jamaica, we have a food-based dietary guideline represented on, initially it was represented by a plate. Now it looks like a pyramid, but it still gives you a pictorial representation of how many food or how much food you should eat from which food group. And that also gives you recommendations about how you meet your nutritional status. If all of these things need additional support, then individuals can seek professional advice from a nutritionist or a dietitian as to strategies that can be utilized to meet their nutritional needs and have improved nutritional status in a bid to lower their risk of infection. A lot has been said. What are the takeaway points? Well, we have said that there is a cyclical relationship between nutritional status and immune status, where it is that if your nutritional status is low, then your immune response may also be low. If it is that you have regular, active, severe infections, it may also worsen your nutritional status and cause individuals to be malnourished. We've also said that optimization of micronutrient status is crucial to improving immune function and activity. And we highlighted some of those micronutrients that are important: iron, zinc, selenium. We spoke to vitamin A, vitamin E, and others. We've also spoken about reducing the severity and incidence of infection is important to reducing the risk of malnutrition. Therefore, dietary intake should be balanced and include a variety of nutrient-dense foods to improve health outcomes. Thank you all for listening. We have come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Wright, for, I would say, a very comprehensive and stimulating presentation this afternoon. I am sure our participants have learned a lot from you. You really give us a lot within the time you presented. You showed us the cyclical relationship between nutrition and infectious disease, the interaction between nutrition, infection, and immunity. You showed us some models looking at infection, malnutrition, and you give us some insight as to what inadequate nutrition, the impact of that on our immune system, and ultimately resulting in the susceptibility to disease and ultimately disease. The relationship between COVID-19 and nutrition, you reviewed with us acquired immunity and showed us the link between nutrition and immunity. You remind us if our nutritional status is low, our immunity will be low. You saw the importance of micronutrients on improving our immunity, such as iron, copper, selenium, zinc, vitamin D, A, etc., and the importance of macronutrients, our proteins, carbohydrates, and fats as critical component in our immune response. We saw the effects of immunity and infection on our dietary intake. So decreased intake ultimately result in infection. Decreased intake decreases our immune system, and ultimately it can result in us acquiring infection. We saw the steps to correct nutrition and improve our status. You look at and ultimately our immunity, the having biochemical and chemical clinical checks, nutrition screening profile, annual checks, anthropometric checks, nutritional screening, dietary assessment, having a balanced nutrition, follow our RDA and FBDA recommendations, and if we need advice, we seek help from our dietitians or nutritionists. And you really showed us that link, that dietary intake should be balanced and include a variety of nutrients to promote a healthy outcome. I thank you once again, Ms. Wright, for such a comprehensive and informative session. Our second presenter for this afternoon is Ms. Melissa Allen, and she will be looking at food safety. Ms. Melissa Allen said, "Food safety has grown on her, and no matter how hard she tries, it follows her." She said she's in love with how to make our food supply secure and, by extension, safe. Ms. Allen started her journey as a nursing major at the Northern Caribbean University, but switched to biology within her first year of college. Little did she know that the stage would have been set for a wonderful experience, leading to her working with one of the most prestigious beverage production companies in the Caribbean. Even though she completed the Master of Public Health degree at the University of Technology, she was not satisfied with her level of involvement in the area of food safety. She indicated that her satisfaction came when she was approached to become an auditor, because she is a tactile learner and loves helping people internalize the underappreciated concept of how to make their food safe. Ms. Allen said she is overjoyed to spend time with her son, who is a handful, but shows her every day she can excel at anything she puts her mind to. She stated that this is a grand opportunity to speak to you all today on her way of life, and she will forever be indebted to the Omega Kappa chapter of Sigma. For the time she is with you, she hopes she can show you all how to improve food safety, or how important food safety is. So please help me welcome Miss Melissa Allen to do her presentation. Miss Allen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to you. I hope you're well. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for your introduction. And I am really appreciative of being with you this afternoon. Now, you've heard that this is a way of life for me. I love food safety. There is nothing that I do that I don't think about food safety. So you'll see me smiling, you'll see me light up, you'll see me using some props to get you more involved in my presentation. All right, so first things first, I like when you participate. Allow me to start my screen sharing activity. And okay, good. I have started, and you will see coming up in a few seconds. So let's go to the chat. I know that some of you have been looking at the chat and you must be wondering what's happening. What's happening? I just posted a link to a Google document. It's a survey just for me to tell you or show you whether or not food safety is really the forefront of our minds. Because it's one thing we do, we eat. So how can we now make food safety be something that is at the forefront of our minds every single day? We eat breakfast, we have lunch, we have dinner, we go to the market, we buy produce. But in all of this, how can we look out for? How can we see, how can we know, and how can we prevent contaminants in our food? So there's a Google document that will take you to a 3-question, it's very short, 3-question survey, and you are invited to complete that survey. And at the end of the presentation and the question and answer segment, I hope that we can show you the results of the survey. So let's begin our presentation formally. Okay. So I'm going to start with a question. Food safety, is it my business? You'll see this question coming out in the presentation. And I coined it this way because asking yourself a question and internalizing a concept makes it easier for us to learn the topic. So let's put food safety in its context then. What if 20 out of 30 employees of the same company are out sick because they ate contaminated food at a staff luncheon 2 days prior? So all of them are out. They are vomiting, they have fever, they have stomach aches, they have diarrhea. 20 out of 30 employees in the same company. Let's look at another scenario. A children's daycare center has been ordered closed because of an FBI, a foodborne illness outbreak. The source of contamination has been localized or traced right back to the daycare center. So here we're seeing 2 different scenarios, but let's bring it closer home to nursing. The entire ICU staff is out because they are all exhibiting signs and or symptoms of a foodborne illness. Let's go back to the question, food safety, is it my business? So for the purposes of this presentation, there are some objectives that we must accomplish. At the end of the session, the participants, that's us, should be able to 1, define the term food safety, at least with 95% accuracy. We should be able as well to outline all 3 safety hazards or contaminants that we may find in our food. 3, we must be able to discuss the importance of food safety. I'm Jamaican, but not just in Jamaica, in the Caribbean. 4, justify the relevance of the World Health Organization's 5 keys of food safety. We should also be able to apply. So when we have learned, how can we now go back home? How can we now go to work? How can we apply what we have learned to our everyday lives? And the final objective sounds a lot, but it will be coined in a way that you can accomplish everything in the session. Number 6, we must be able to look at social implications, and we must be able to talk about our pockets, our financial implication, or the financial implication. So if we don't observe food safety guidelines, what's going to happen to us as a society? What's going to happen to our homes? What's happening to our workplaces? And generally speaking, by extension, what's happening to our country and our region? So we have to look at some key definitions. You will hear some of these definitions throughout the presentation. So to give us a little background, here are some key definitions that should remain in our minds as we progress. Food, what is that? Is it only solid? Are we sure? Food is any substance, whether simple, mixed, or compounded, that is used as food, drink, confectionery, or a condiment. Safety, what is that? It's looking at, in terms of food safety, the overall quality of the food. Whatever we eat, it must be fit for consumption. And I love the presentation so far from last week to now, because I see a common thread in sanitizing, in keeping ourselves and our environment clean. There was a session that I loved on hand washing. And you'll come to see that hand washing is a very, very, very important when we come to the topic of food safety. So sanitation, it's about being clean. It's about protecting yourself and your environment. Relating all of this now to food poisoning or a foodborne illness. Once you have or intake something, food that is laced or contaminated with any of the 3 contaminants, you are likely to get sick. So there are infectious agents, bacteria, viruses, parasites, or there are toxins that will cause you to get sick if you ingest food that is contaminated. Lastly, food safety. That's why we're here. Food safety refers to the conditions and practices that preserve the quality of food. Note here, quality of food, to prevent contamination and foodborne illnesses. So again, let's go back to our question. Food safety, is it our business or is it my business? So as the participants here in Zoom and on YouTube, let's bring it home. Let's localize food safety as a concept that we need to know about. So what kind of contaminants are there? There are 3 main types that need to be eliminated from our food, because we need to eat, of course, to respire, to have energy. We need nutrients to carry on our daily activities. Biological contaminants, we have chemical contaminants, and we have physical contaminants. But what's the main difference between all these 3? That's where we go. That's where we're going. That's where we are going right now. Have we ever seen this in our kitchen? Have we ever seen this at a restaurant? Have we seen this somewhere? This is a picture showing you tomatoes that are rotting, that have growth, fungal growth on it. Have we ever seen that before? Have we ever seen someone take the same tomato and just peel off the little part with the growth on it, the fungus on it? Have we ever seen that? So if we turn our attention to biological contaminants, though, these are contaminants, or any contaminants such as bacteria, molds, or their spores, viruses, other biological material that can contaminate our food, seafood toxins, mushroom toxins. This is something that is common. Salmonella, we hear that term a lot. We're speaking about contamination of our food. We're speaking about food safety. How can we ensure that what we eat is safe? And I won't even put safe in quotations because, you know, it's an important concept to capture. I hope I'm not speaking too fast and you are capturing the concepts as we go along. Right, so now we are going to speak about preventative measures. We have a saying here, prevention better than cure. And that's true. Preventative measures eliminate the chances or the probability of you becoming sick if you ingest food, that is contaminated. So we want to purchase food from suppliers that are reputable, businesses that are registered, farmers that are registered. We also want to prevent contamination by maintaining good personal hygiene. So if we are cooking a meal, we want to ensure that we are clean, our clothes, it's clean too, our fingernails are short, free from dirt and debris. And it's very good that we had the hand washing seminar before this, because you were shown how to wash your hands properly. You were shown that, yes, your fingernails can have debris or dirt particles underneath, and you will have to eliminate or get rid of by using a little brush. And your nail shouldn't be that long anyway, so you should not need a bristle or bristles to get under your fingernails. If you're using equipment, you have to clean the equipment. You have to sanitize the equipment. We won't be cooking in dirty pots, would we? We would need to ensure that whatever we do, we wash our materials, our equipment properly with potable water, clean water. So our kitchen or whatever area we're using to prepare food to, we should sanitize, we should clean. And lastly, we should have a pest control system. Now, this is specific to factories, food and beverage organizations. But if we're going to bring it home, to be more specific, control pests, what does that mean? If you are in the kitchen and you see excreta, if you see some little droppings, you must investigate what's happening. What's the source? What's the source of those droppings? Because if you find yourself with a pest problem, it is advised that you call a trained individual that will find the source and get rid of the source of your pest. Okay, let's move to, I'm trying to change my screen. Let's now move to, good, it's moving. Physical contaminants. What are they? Foreign objects that can find their way into your food, like your hair, little wire objects, dust, stones, metal shavings, God forbid, glass fragments, pieces of your fingernails, your earrings, your hair clips. Those are physical contaminants that, they may fall off, by mistake into your food and you don't realize. And that contaminant is going to find its way into someone's digestive system. I know there are questions. We'll take the questions soon. Don't worry. So if you're going to prevent contamination by physical contaminants, what do I do? What can I do? Can I do anything? Or should I let a professional do it for me? No, it's very simple. When I was working at the beverage production company, our lab coat, our protective equipment never had a pocket, a top pocket or a breast pocket, because you tend to carry things in that pocket. And when you are preparing the beverage, things can fall out of the pocket. We never had our phones. We always wore a hairnet. You don't want to wear, your nail polish or false nails when you're working with food, because pieces of the nail polish can chip off and fall into your food. You want to clean, as we said before, clean equipment, clean your can openers, because if you realize when you're using the can opener sometimes, you can't see my can. All right, well, this one has a little thing that you can pop open. But when you're using the can opener, there can be pieces of metal left on the can opener. And you want to ensure that by cleaning the can opener, you get any residue or any foreign material off the can opener. Now, this is something that I don't think, I don't think many Jamaicans have coverings over their lights. I don't think so. Or many persons in the Caribbean by extension. We want to cover anything that has the possibility of entering our food. So our lights, yes, they are glass. What if it breaks? So we're thinking about the possibility of anything getting into our food. That's where our mind should be. What can we do to eliminate contamination of our food? I saw this picture and I'm telling you, it speaks volumes. And I saw it and I said, yes, let me share. Look at what's happening. I'm telling you, chemical contaminants. These are substances that can, of course, get into your food, and you are now, as a result of that contaminated food, you are sick. Now, we are home more than normal, and you find that we use cleaning sometimes, because not everybody does it, we use cleaning agents frequently. And sometimes we don't clean the area off properly after we have used, the cleaning agent, and we drop the bread, we drop the meat, we drop the cutting board, and, residue from that chemical agent that you are using can get into or on your food. So you want to be very careful. Substances like your pesticides, your cleaning products, your sanitizers, and let me just stick at the pesticide for a moment. Remember, food comes from somewhere. True? We eat cabbage, we eat callaloo, we eat grown provisions, and the farmers have to use pesticides to control pests on their farm. And on the bottle of that pesticide, there are specific instructions for use. So they would say to a farmer that after spraying that crop, you do not reap for X or Y amount of time. That concept is tied in a term called bioaccumulation, which speaks to the accumulation of that product in that food. You eat it without looking at proper usage, proper sanitation, proper washing of that same food. You would find that, unfortunately, you will exhibit some symptoms of a foodborne illness. But you know us, we don't really, we start feeling sick and we say, I don't need to go to the doctor. I can just ride it out. Yes, I know some of you are smiling and nodding your heads because that's what we do. We just write it out, and then we don't recognize that, hey, we are experiencing symptoms of an illness associated, directly associated with the food we are consuming. Public education, I believe, is one of the best ways to prevent contamination. So you have to teach your employees. You have to show, because some persons are not visual learners, you have to show them with their hands how to use chemicals, how to store chemicals, how to read the labels, how to interpret the labels. Because of the manufacturer's recommendations, you always want to use chemicals accordingly. And of course, you're going to want to wash your hands after using chemicals properly. And as we said before, as we spoke about pests before, we want to, if you have a business and you never thought about having a pest control person, a trained person, I think it's prudent that you have such a person in your organization, because training is something that once you have that knowledge, it's very, very, very difficult to get rid of. So at this time, I know you don't, let's not go to the activity, not yet. I have a little hairnet. And I chose this little activity or demonstration because not everybody has a hairnet lying around. So if you're handling food, the first thing, more than likely, the first thing they will give you is protective equipment. So here goes. I put on my hairnet, and please observe that I didn't know this before I went to work in the establishment. I did not. I used to wear my hairnet like this, with my ears out and the nape of my neck out. My hairs are still out. However, you want to wear your hairnet in a way that, of course, I hope you're seeing, the hairnet is covering my hairline. The hairnet is also covering an orifice or an opening, covering my ears. And the hairnet, let me turn to this side. The hairnet is also covering the hairline or the nape of my neck. So I'm showing you now that just in case you go somewhere and you see someone wearing the hairnet incorrectly, you can share, because you have not truly learned if you cannot apply the information. So let's do this one more time quickly. Your hairline must be covered. Your ears as well must be covered. All right. I hope that you You understand the correct way. If you do, type in the chat for me, say yes, raise your hand, any activity that you choose to. And I know you are on YouTube with me too. So we are down to do something nice. We have been sitting, we have been listening, but now it's time for you to participate. Because what's learning without participation, eh? So, has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been to a food establishment and you see garbage at or near the entrance? Miss Rosalie Brown said this. She said she had this experience at a well-known establishment in Portland, Jamaica. The interior, including the restrooms, they were so dirty and untidy that I had to quickly leave the place. Other patrons were there and they appeared satisfied with the service, leaving me to wonder if I were being too critical. This was taken from the Jamaica Gleaner, August 18, 2010. And there are other articles that I will share with you. So now it's your turn. You are going to unscramble for us. Let's see if the participants are quick. Let's see. You are unscrambling this message for us. So based on what we have learned so far, what is the message? You have 5 words. You're going to unscramble the words, and then there's a little clue that I won't tell you, but what is the message to us? Let's see if we can. Miss Basco, your hand is up. All right. Are you willing to open your microphone and share the message with all of us? Let's see if you got it.
Sorry, I'm still trying. My hand was up because I was saying yes.
Okay.
But I can't figure is wash.
All right, at least you're at one. You are one of them.
Oh, thank you.
I like when the participants, participate.
Number 3 is
Oh, I see hands. Hold on. We're gonna take Miss Melissa Walker, and then we take who is that? That's Miss Donette Wright. Let's see if we can get the message, and at the same time, we are going to check the chat too.
oh, surfaces, wash hands often.
So I'm getting wash hands and surfaces often, or wash often hands, surfaces there, and I put it as and. So I guess the message would be wash hands and surfaces often.
Wash hands and surfaces.
Yes.
Right. Wow. Wow. I'm so happy that we are in tune with what's happening. Is that the same thing you had, Miss Kennedy? I see Kadian in the chat with us too. Hands and surfaces often, yes. I see Miss Hines in the chat too. Yes, that's good. Wash hands and surfaces often. We have a saying, these two things, you would be surprised.
Yes, it's the same thing I had.
Oh, okay, good, Miss Basco. Thank you. Thank you for participating, everyone. These two, our hands, you'll be surprised to see what comes off our hands when we don't wash our hands for an extended period of time. And because we are home, we tend to take some things for granted, and we don't really want to slip. So let's continue from that little, it's not an icebreaker, but it's just a little activity to get us more comfortable with the material. All right. So why do we think foodborne illnesses or food poisoning is such a challenge for us? Why? The signs and the symptoms associated with a foodborne illness mimic some other diseases. They do. And sometimes, as I said before, as we discussed before, sometimes we just pass it off. And we do not take the time to track what we eat. So it's a deliberate effort, because how can you know for sure that you are experiencing an FBI, a foodborne illness, if you don't remember the meal you had? Some people say, I don't feel good, I don't feel good, I just feel queasy. And that queasiness might very well be, it might be associated with a foodborne illness. So these are things that we need to look at. Some people say, yeah, I'm fine, I don't need to go to the doctor. They neglect to tell their doctor that they were at a party and they ate some food, and then, you know, they started to feel stomach aches and pains, and then they started to have diarrhea. They don't really share that information. So underreporting it's a major factor why we don't really find out the majority of cases of foodborne illnesses, because a person just don't pay it any mind. Misconceptions. Let's turn our attention to some misconceptions. I look at my plate of food and it looks fine. My meal of rice and peas and chicken and potato salad and vegetables look perfectly fine. But food that look perfectly fine may very well be contaminated. So that is why we started out with the contaminants, to show you that they are apparent, and if they are present in your food, you more than likely will get sick. All right, so I know we have trees, we're in the Caribbean, and I'm guilty of this sometimes, to be honest. I go in the tree and I see a fruit, and the fruit is nice and plump and ripe. And I pick that fruit and I do something like this. I just, you know, I see people do it too. They just do something like this. They wipe the fruit and they take a bite. There's no washing. There's no washing. I shouldn't even say little to no. There's no washing. You must be able to wash foods before you eat, before you cook. And you have to, let's go back to tracking what you eat, because there is a misconception that, you know, is the last thing we eat, that's why I'm sick. But not necessarily. Based on the agent, based on the bacterium that is present in that food, you have several hours or some days to see symptoms or to see signs. So tracking your food will give you an idea as to what you ate when and where. Can't leave out the where. And you can pinpoint what's happening, and you can report. Reporting is key to catching FBIs, foodborne illnesses. Very important. All right. No. We have food from unsafe sources. We don't cook our food properly. When we have foods that are supposed to be kept frozen or cold, we break that chain for too long of a period, and we also partake, or we are a part of, cross-contamination. These are major problems that threaten food safety, that, you know, for a population, we must be able to look at all of these factors and say, okay, what am I doing from the farm to the table or from the farm to the fork? What am I doing? Because we started the presentation with a question, food safety. Is it my business? So keep that question in mind. So let's use our hand lens and take a closer look. What are the main causes of an FBI, foodborne illness? Cross-contamination. We abuse time and temperature laws, and we are not observing proper personal hygiene. There is a link. You can go on the CEC website. They are filled with material on food safety. You can go on the Pan American Health Organization's website too. And it's good that we have our ministries of health with departments directly related to food safety and health promotion that we can talk to. And they are on Instagram. So I message them sometimes too, to get information. Information is out there, and without being armed with information, you cannot make an informed decision. So let's look at cross-contamination. Now, cross-contamination occurs when microorganisms are transferred from one surface or food to another. So that organism, that disease-causing organism, can be transferred from hand to food, food to food, equipment to food. Okay. You see, we're coming back to this thing. Proper hygiene. Wash your hands. If you have cuts, sores, or wounds, you really should not be handling food. Really. You need to keep your fingernails short and polished and clean. And you should avoid as much as you can. Avoid wearing jewelry when you are preparing food. Food to food. Now, this is something I find very interesting because we're going to, when we're finished here this afternoon, we are going to look in our fridges and see how have we stocked our refrigerator. Let's go in detail with that. So food to food contamination occurs when harmful organisms from one food contaminant, you realize that your meats, we want to store our meats at the bottom of the fridge or the freezer. So we won't have, in case thawing begins to occur, we do not have a draining of the meat on any other food. You don't want to mix leftover food with fresh food. We don't want to have contaminated vegetables and fruits, so you must wash them in cold running water. Running, that's the key. When we have our cutting boards or our counters in our kitchen, we should not prepare raw foods like raw meat and vegetables on the same surface at the same time. So we're cooking some beef stew, and we have our mince, and right after we have prepared our mince, we just cut up the pak choy or the cabbage on the same cutting board or the same counter. That's a recipe for an FBI. Here we are. It's all about preventative measures. Prevention is always better than cure. in our kitchens, let's move away from the large entities and focus on us. Use separate cutting boards for different foods, meats different, vegetables different. Again, you cannot run away from sanitization. You cannot run away from hygiene. You use specific containers for various food products. And when you have your cloth or your paper towel, you know, sometimes we have accidents in the kitchen. If you're going to use paper towels or cloths for wiping spills, especially for meats, you do not want to, or it's not recommended that you use that same paper towel or cloth for anything else. So you want to pay close attention to the materials you use in terms of your cloth and your paper towel to wipe any given area in your kitchen. And you will realize that I am going to speak directly to us. So we're going to move away a little bit from the big industries or entities for a few minutes. Time and temperature abuse. Wow. We talk about chefs, we talk about kitchen staff. Yes, they are trained in proper food handling techniques. But let's pay attention to, or let's zero in on this concept. Because there is a zone, they call it the danger zone, that bacteria, bacteria like certain conditions. They like warmth. And between certain temperatures, as you see on the graphic representation, between 5 degrees Celsius and 60 degrees Celsius, bacteria kind of like that environment and they rapidly divide or multiply. So it's advised that you don't leave your food in this temperature, your room temperature, for too long of a period. All right, I know you're in the chat with us, but we're gonna come to it very soon. So of course, persons are trained to know temperature zones, to control the concept of getting or preventing foodborne illnesses. But it's important for us to know too, that the temperatures that where foods are susceptible to rapid growth in Fahrenheit, this is 41 degrees to 135 degrees. I just spoke about Celsius or Celsius measurements. But in case you are more familiar with Fahrenheit measurements, we look at 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 135. It's all about limiting the replication or the multiplication of bacterial agents or any disease-causing organism, really. So you want to keep your food hot if you're holding, and you want to keep cold foods cold. So if it is that you are, right, if you are thawing your meat, this is a common practice. We take the meat out and we put it in the sink and we leave it and we do the housework, we do the chores, we go to the supermarket, we come back. It is best to thaw your meats in the refrigerator. Yes, it takes a long time. It's very inconvenient, but we must remember the concept of time temperature abuse. So foods that reach temperatures danger zone when they are left too long, we just spoke about that. Bacteria like moisture, they like heat, they like oxygen. And when you leave the food out in your danger zone, that's a nice environment. That's an ideal environment for the bacteria to grow very rapidly. So again, You need to keep hot foods hot, cold foods cold. And we are going to skip a little bit to the last bullet. If you have hot foods and you want to cool, you are going to use a container that is wide and shallow. That way, the food cools down in a quicker time. Big T, time, temperature. So you want to, of course, if you're going to hold food, you want to keep food above the temperature, which favors bacterial replication, or the rapid replication of the disease-causing organism, sorry. You don't want to leave food out for a long period of time. Always remember that T word, time, the other T word, temperature. These two are married. These two concepts go together. Aha. We just spoke about preventative measures. All right, we want to cover our foods in the refrigerator so they are protected against agents that can contaminate, because the aim of food safety is to prevent contamination from the get-go. If compatible with the food type, you want to bring the pH level of food to an acidic state. Most bacteria not really, they don't really like that kind of environment. So we want to do things that, hey, what can I do to ensure that this bacterium or agent does not replicate? Remember, we started out by looking at a question: food safety, is it my business? Always remember the two T's, time and temperature. You do not recommend it. You do not want to have your food out of refrigeration, for more than 4 hours, cumulative time. So from preparing to serving, you don't really want to have the food out for too long. Remember, come back to time and come back to temperature. One of our objectives too spoke about implications. We did say that for one of the objectives, we would have looked at implications. When we do not observe proper food safety protocols, what can happen to us? So let's take it at a local level, at an individual level. We get sick, can't go to work. So I don't want to say suffer really, but your quality of life for a few days diminishes, or your quality of life is not as good as it used to be. And you end up at the doctor, so you're spending some money to go to the doctor. And worst case scenario, you die. I put that one last. It's a shocking, it's very shocking, but persons do die from illnesses associated with food. Yes, we look at ourselves, yes, but what about the establishment? So we go to an establishment and we purchase some food. Yes, we realize that we have stomach aches, we vomit, we have fever, we have chills. And when you have outbreaks, the establishment is going to suffer too. Nothing beats publicity. You want to put your business out there, you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook. There are so many sites now you can promote your business. But what if your business is associated, unfortunately, with a food illness outbreak? You're going to lose your customers. Nobody's going to come to your establishment to buy food. Even if the requisite authorities, the Ministry of Health, comes and does their inspection and you are now clear to serve food to the general population, customers will have a lingering thought in their minds that, pardon me, I'm going to use patois. But now go back at that place there, because people get sick from them food. That alone may kill your business. So you lose your reputation. Employees may not want to work there at that food establishment, so they resign, they leave. You will be seen as a liability, unfortunately, and your insurance premiums will go up. And this is not a scenario that we want to have in our country, in our region. We don't want to have such outbreaks that impacts the general population negatively. All right, so this is a picture that will show you how we tend, most times, some of us, to buy food. Now, sometimes we are hungry and we just want a quick fix. And we started out the presentation with sharing a survey. Do you ask to see public health certificates? Do you? You go to an establishment and you don't see any certificate on the wall, but you don't ask. You just go in the line, you buy your food and you leave. What guarantee do you have that this establishment has been monitored, has been inspected, has been cleared by the requisite authority, the Ministry of Health? So the burden of FBIs, as we said before, is underestimated. We don't have a big picture or a true picture. We don't. Because it's difficult to establish the relationships between contaminated food and deaths, because persons don't come forward most times. And we pass it off as just queasy. So let's go to some data. I'm promising that I will let you go soon. Let's go to some food safety data. Wow, this is a mouthful. The United Nations, all of this data came from the United Nations website. And you are invited to go there too, because you see other things that, it's really shocking. The United Nations reports that in 2019, an estimated 77 million people in the Americas suffer from an episode of foodborne illness each year. And what's important to note is that half of that number are children. So there are certain groups in the population that are susceptible to foodborne illnesses. Our children, our elderlies, they more than likely will get sick, and the severity of their illness is heightened. Available data indicates that foodborne illnesses or diseases, they cost. They're not cheap. 700,000, that's the least, to 19 million annually. That's the amount of money it costs the Caribbean. That's a lot of money. The World Health Organization does tell us that persons who eat contaminated food 420,000 people die every year. And these deaths are preventable. So it's always good to start off with preventative measures. So whether you're a farmer, a supplier, a processor, just a general person, food safety really is our business. Food security cannot occur without food safety. This quote is coming directly from the FAO Director General. These organizations are coined specifically to look at food safety, to ensure that the Caribbean, the world at large, has system in place to ensure that their population does not experience foodborne illnesses. So there are keys. Just like you want to go home and you put your key in your door and you open your door and you can relax at home, there are keys that will open the door really to food safety. And we spoke about them. So we're coming down to the end. Keep clean. Sanitation must be up there, must. You separate raw foods and cooked foods all the time. You want to use running water, safe water, and safe raw materials. That's another key. You also, and I'm not going in order, as you may have noticed. So sanitation, separating raw and cooked foods. We spoke about using safe water or a reputable water source. You want to cook your meat thoroughly, and then you look at the big T's: time, temperature. These are keys, or 5 keys to safer food. It's very important that you can go on the World Health Organization's website too. There is a plethora of information for you that you can also share with your colleagues, with your family members. I would not be fair to you if I left these 2 pillars out. I would not be fair. First in, first out, and the concept of HACCP. Now, allow me again, I like to use props. So, my baked beans, I have black beans. This is my grocery list. I go to the supermarket and I pick up these items. Now, if I look at the bottom of my can, I'm going to see some dates. Now, it's important that we know how to read these dates. So my baked beans, my hot and spicy baked beans, they expire in 2022 and in the first month. So this is January. My beans, my black beans, expire in April of 2022. So, you know, expiry dates close. Which one of these products do I need to use first? So the first in, first out policy dictates that you use the goods, or you follow a specific order in which they are bought, manufactured, and looking at the expiry date. That's how your supermarkets operate. So when you buy your groceries and you go home, you really want to look at the expiry dates of the products, and the ones that expire first or earlier, you use those products first. Looking at your HACCP program, farm to table, farm to fork, preventative measures must be in place. Hazards or contaminants, if you will, must be recognized at every single point in food production. So from you plant the seed to the cabbage being on your plate, that program looks or follows the process right through to ensure that what you get on your plate is something that is not contaminated with either biological, physical, or chemical contaminant. So this is a concept that is important. And I like food. So the question is, am I eating safe food? Am I? Are you? We're getting down to the end. Mishandling of food within the home is another source of food illness outbreaks. So think about what we do, because I'm a part of it. What do we do? All the time, follow or choose facilities that are reputable and those facilities that follow public health guidelines in terms of hygiene, yes, but proper production and delivery of your food. These quotes were taken from Dr. Karen Paulson Edwards, and this is an article that I read in the Jamaica Observer. So foodborne illnesses, they claim a lot of lives, and we don't want to become a statistic. So hang in there, the finish line is coming. Let us recap. What have I learned? We should have, or we discussed, 3 main types of contaminants. By extension, we also looked at how do we prevent the contaminants in our food. We also looked at 5 keys to ensure that we are eating safe food. And we discussed the importance of paying close attention to some concepts. We looked at the big T, the 2 T's. We looked at hygiene. We looked at hand washing, not largely because of the other set of presentations done by my colleagues. But we're going to end right where we started. And I'm going to invite you to type in the chat or on YouTube. You're going to answer this question. Food safety, is it my business? Let it sink in for a few seconds. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating in this presentation. And I really hope that you saw a part of my world for a few, maybe an hour or so, and you will apply what you learned today in your daily lives. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for participating.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Allen, for such an insightful, I would say, thought-provoking, informative, and interactive presentation. You reminded us that food safety is a condition and practices that preserve the quality of food to prevent contamination and foodborne illness. Very important for us to remember. The types of contaminants being that of biological, chemical, and physical, and the ways we can prevent it. For instance, prevention of chemical contaminants, wearing of hair restraints, avoidance of jewelry, avoid carrying pencils and pens, and cleaning our openers regularly. Chemical contaminants, storage of the chemical, using of proper labels, hand washing after use of chemicals, etc. You showed us that food poisoning can indeed be a challenge for healthcare workers, and even it tends to mimic the patient with regards to other signs of disease. they hardly ever track what they may eat and think it might be some form of digestion. And it's something very important we need to remember as healthcare workers, the importance of food hygiene. And we saw where foodborne illness can be due to cross-contamination, temperature abuse, poor personal hygiene, etc. And you went through a lot of ways we can help in preventing those. And I want to really remind us of the 5 keys, if I should move forward, where we maintain cleanliness, separate raw and cooked food, cook food thoroughly, keep food at safe temperature, hot food hot, cold food cold, use safe water and raw materials. You look at the tenets of food safety, first in, first out method of inventory, particularly when we are going to use the food, and recognize hazards and place preventative measures to prevent those hazards. Food safety in the home, we must remember about mishandling of food within the home and as another source of foodborne illness. So I want to thank you again, Ms. Allen, for such an informative presentation.
You're most welcome.
So we have had 2 excellent presentations thus far. I am now going to open the question and answer segment. So our presenters, please be on standby. Just to remind you, for those of you who are on Zoom, please use the raised hand icon so we can acknowledge you. And you can use your mic for your oral question and address the presenter who you would like to answer the question. Participants on YouTube, please remember to write a question in the chat so we can address that as well. So the floor is now open for questions. Let me see. Are there any questions?
Oh, Dr. Mohammed, I saw a question in the chat. I glimpsed a question that spoke about mushrooms, how to identify mushrooms that are poisonous if you don't know what they look like. The rule is you want to avoid mushrooms that have white gills or a ring around the stem. You want to also avoid mushrooms with a red cap. A red, it looks kind of like an umbrella, but that little part there at the top is red. And you also want to avoid mushrooms that have red stems. So I saw that question earlier, but it just jumped back at me.
Thank you for that response. I saw some questions, but somehow I cannot locate them in the chat here. There are some comments here, very informative. Foods.
There was a question by Miss Henry Williams. Is the rinsing of fruits and vegetables in salt water an effective way of sanitizing, cleaning them, and removing insects that may be lodged in the foliage of leafy vegetables?
Could you repeat the last half of that question, please?
Removing insects that may be lodged in the foliage of the leafy vegetables.
You don't necessarily have to wash with salt. You don't necessarily need to do that, but you would have to, move the foliage apart and do some inspection as well. You don't necessarily need to wash with salt. That is, I've seen persons do that to remove debris and to remove small insects, but it's something you can practice. However, it's not really necessary. You can use potable water to wash your fruits and your vegetables. I also saw, by extension, someone mentioning something about bleach, but I'm not sure if that person would like to ask that question again. I lost the comment, sorry. I lost the comment in the chat.
Yeah, I think the person should ask the question again.
Hi, good evening. I am Henry Williams. And are you hearing me?
You're a bit muffled somehow, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm the one who was asking the question. It is cultural to wash our meat and fish with either vinegar or lime juice or some other kind of citrus juice. I have learned that in the case where the vinegar or the citrus juice is unavailable, a little bleach could be used. I was asking, is it safe or could that possibly lead to chemical contamination of the food?
All right, I know my colleague that, oh, that's Miss Henry Williams. You're low. I got something about cultural and washing with vinegar and lime juice, but I'm not hearing you clearly to hear the other end of the comment or the question.
Are you hearing me better now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
In the case where vinegar or citrus juice is not available for the washing of fish and meat, I have learned that a little bleach could be substituted. But I was asking if it's safe or could that lead to chemical contamination of the meat and fish?
No, I wouldn't advise bleach. Because in layman's terms, persons don't look at the label, and sometimes they don't follow the requisite guidelines for use. I really would not recommend bleach to wash fruits and vegetables.
Okay, there's a question here. Thank you for the answer. What agent do we use for fruits, vegetables, and ground provision?
All right, you can use a little soap. I saw that comment in the chat some minutes ago. But if you're gonna use that agent, you have to ensure that rinsing of your fruits and your vegetables is done under cold running water. So it's not a case where you have the fruit and vegetable in a bowl and you dip and take it out. No, you have to ensure that rinsing that fruit, vegetable, or ground provision is done for an extended period of time to get rid of any residue of soap on that food.
Okay, just a comment, and I think this is important, where Ms. Dawkins is saying she appreciates the fact that the things we take for granted can be our detriment. Well done presentation. And yes, sometimes we really do take things for granted and don't realize until we get ill. Are there any other questions?
Another question was by Joan Facey. Many of us take our lunch to work and use the microwave to heat. How long should we heat if it was on or off the refrigerator? Yeah.
All right. So in relation to that question, when we cook and we normally place the food in our fridge overnight, the best thing to do is not to heat that food before you put it in your lunch bag or whatever container to take it to work. Keep it cold, and that's in the case your workplace has a fridge or an area to store your food. Keep it cold. Once you get to work, place that food in the fridge. And once you get to your microwave, you want to heat your food twice.
Okay.
So we're taking into consideration that your food has been out, in the temperature zone or the danger zone, and you really want to limit the time. I don't know how long your commute is to work, but the advice is to keep your food cold before you leave home. Get to work, keep it cold until it's time for you to have that meal. And once it's time for you to have that meal, it's advised that you heat that food twice, especially if it's meat.
Ms. Dawkins is asking what about the use of vinegar? Is that for, I'm not clear what she's referring to vinegar. In what sense, Ms. Dawkins, can you clarify? Is it for cleaning or?
Oh, she's on YouTube?
Yes, she's on YouTube.
Okay.
Oh, she wouldn't. Okay. So I am not sure. She's asking, what about vinegar?
Vinegar. Yes, you can use vinegar to rinse because the acidity contained in that product is a condition that, bacterial agents, they don't like. They don't like. And you want, as we said before, you must be able to create conditions that limit the multiplication or replication of bacterial agents. So you can use vinegar for rinsing, but follow that up with running water.
Okay, thank you for that. A comment here, I wash sweet potatoes, cook and eat them in the skin. Is that safe?
That is safe, but keep in consideration that you must ensure that all dirt, because these are ground provisions, the dirt, the debris is off the skin. So you can use a little, soft brush, soft brush and wash your sweet potato, your yam, if you roast yam and that kind of a thing. You want to get rid of the dirt and the debris before you initiate the cooking process, because eventually you are eating them in the skin. So you want to ensure that the protective coating, which is the skin, is also safe for consumption. Thank you.
Thank you again. Another question, is it wrong to wash certain fruits and vegetables with a little soap? I am not sure if you answered that as yet.
Oh, yes, a colleague of mine did say so. She made a comment in the chat a few minutes ago about washing in soap. And I did answer, but I can, reiterate. You must always follow up with rinsing for an extended period of time with running water. Must.
Okay. Okay, another question. Many of us take our lunch to work and use the microwave to heat. How long should we heat? If how long should we heat? If was on or off? I'm not sure if it maybe was on or off the refrigerator. I guess there's a little typo here. how long should we heat if it was on or off the refrigerator?
Okay, I think
Yeah, she answered that.
did hear that question.
All right.
Yeah, I did answer. You take always take into consideration the T's. Keep your food cold, hot food hot. So if you have your food overnight in the refrigerator, you need to keep that food cold until you get to the point of having that meal, and you really should heat that meal twice to prevent or to, limit the replication of bacteria.
Another question, how effective is vitamin supplement in providing the necessary nutrients needed for overall health? And a follow-up, which vitamin supplement would you recommend if applicable?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Mohammed. Through you, Mrs. Williams-Harris, thank you for posting that question. So the World Health Organization and others who are proponents of nutrition recommend that sources of vitamin, minerals, and your nutrients should come from dietary sources, from food sources primarily. So people should employ principles of variety and nutrient density in order to meet their requirements for vitamins and minerals in its entirety from dietary sources. However, if an individual has a subclinical or a clinical deficiency, where it is that they are symptomatic or biochemical tests can show that they have less than normal levels of any particular vitamin or mineral, one of the treatment approaches can be supplement usage. So the guidance concerning supplement is that as you consume a single targeted nutrient, it is likely that you may have issues with toxicities with others, because supplements are usually in excess of your RDAs. So that's the concern with having supplements routinely. If they have identified deficiencies, then a part of the recommendation would be supplement use. And so wholesalely, I would not provide a recommendation concerning the usage of supplements in accordance with that guidance.
Okay, thank you again for that. Any more questions? Just to ask you, is there any link between the use of vitamin D and prevention of COVID-19? I've been seeing some information on that, but is there any truth in it?
That's a beautiful question, Dr. Mohammed. So I too have been reading the articles concerning nutritional status and the risk, as well as the symptomatic response to COVID-19. Some of the data at this time, it is not fully supported. There is still a debate concerning the protective role that nutritional status has concerning COVID-19. However, persons with appropriate micronutrient status, meaning that you would have had the normal circulating levels of vitamin D and other antioxidants, as well as other nutrients that modulate the immune system, tend to have less severe symptoms, and their recovery period is shorter. With respect to, again, having higher than normal levels of vitamin D, the evidence is unclear as to whether there is a protective effect beyond your RDAs, your normal levels that are recommended. But certainly, the current status is that immunity, infection control in COVID-19 and other viruses, it is better when it is that your micronutrient status and overall nutritional status is optimal.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions from our participants? Ms. Thompson is saying thanks to the presenters for an interesting presentation.
Dr. Mohammed, if you would permit me, I did promise us that we would take a look at the survey.
Oh, sure, yes.
I almost forgot. My apologies. I'm about to share my screen with the results of that survey. 29 persons have responded, and I hope you are seeing my screen. 55% of the persons who responded said that, yes, they have had a food illness before. 10.3%, they weren't sure, and 34.5% said no. So we already see that we are chartering waters that we really need to be careful of. When I go to a restaurant, the question was asked, when I go to a restaurant to purchase food, I normally look at their public health certificate before I look at their food prices. Look at the response. Look at the response, everyone. That's shocking. And it's a question I asked because I wanted to bring it out that food safety is our business. So 86% said no, I buy the food and leave. That's alarming, because if the establishment has not been certified by the Ministry of Health, we really should not be purchasing food there, because regular inspections are done that will guarantee us somewhat that our food is safe. The last question was, statement was, I believe I know enough about food safety to keep myself and my family safe. Well, thankfully, thank God, most of the respondents did agree that they do know enough about food safety to keep themselves safe. And this is the direction, we should be heading as persons, as countries, as regions, so that we know what we're doing and where we're going in terms of food safety. I almost forgot, my apologies to everyone. Thank you so much for facilitating me sharing the responses. I know it's late, thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for that, Ms. Allen. I'm seeing a comment, thank you ladies, lots of very useful information. Ms. Vasco, I believe. Any other comments, questions? Is that it? So, can we? Excellent presentation. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So if we do not have any more questions, I think we should close this session now. Ms. Allen, Ms. Alia Brown, can we go ahead and close this session?
Thank you.
So,
good evening.
I just want to finish.
Right.
Okay. So once again, our sincere gratitude to our presenters, Ms. Melissa Allen and Ms. Donetta Lissy Wright, for their excellent presentation this afternoon. To all our participants, thank you for joining us for our fourth session on Omega Kappa Infection Control webinar series, and thank you for your questions and comments. I am certain you all would have learned something new today, as I have. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend Ms. Cheryl Garrix-Lloyd, President of Omega Kappa Chapter, and the Planning Committee for their excellent work in arranging this infection control series. We invite you all to join us for our next session on Friday, April 23rd on infection prevention and control. It was indeed my pleasure being your moderator this afternoon. And I now hand you over to Ms. Alia Brown, Vice President, who has a short presentation for you all, and she will close this session. Thank you.
Good evening to all, once again. So there has been questions about how to become a member or more information about the Sigma or the Omega Kappa chapter. So we're going to do a short presentation about the chapter. So the history. In 1922, 6 nurses founded Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing, today known as Sigma, at the Indiana University Training School for Nurses, which is now the Indiana University School of Nursing in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. The founders chose the name from the Greek words storke, thassos, and time, meaning love, courage, and honor. Sigma is a nonprofit organization with the headquarters in the United States. So our vision is connected, empowered nurse leaders transforming global healthcare. Our vision, developing nurse leaders anywhere to improve healthcare everywhere. How do you become a member? Potential members who meet our eligibility criteria are invited to join Sigma, the baccalaureate and graduate nursing students who demonstrate excellence in scholarship and nurse leaders exhibiting exceptional achievements in nursing. Here are some additional facts about our membership. Sigma has more than 135,000 active members, approximately 540 chapters in more than 100 countries. For undergraduates who would like to enroll, you must be enrolled in a bachelor's nursing program or equivalent, achieve academic excellence based on set criteria, be ranked in the highest 35% of their nursing class, have completed 1/2 of the nursing curriculum. RN to BSN students must have completed 12 credit hours. For graduate students, you must have completed 1/4 of the nursing curriculum, achieve academic excellence based on set criteria, and meet the expectation of academic integrity. As it relates to nurse leaders must be legally recognized to practice in their country, have a minimum of a baccalaureate degree or equivalent in any field, and demonstrate achievement in nursing. What are the benefits of becoming a member of Sigma? Career mentorship, access to nursing professional development courses, access to respiratory, opportunity to network, opportunity to volunteer, and nursing conferences. These are some pictures, and this is when the Omega Kappa chapter was charted. So some facts about the Omega Kappa chapter. This chapter is number 560. It's based on the UWI School of Nursing Mona. It's a Caribbean chapter, so it's not only made up of nurses from Jamaica, the Bahamas, Trinidad, the likes. And it was charted on May 30th, 2019, and is made up of nursing students and nurse leaders. So these are some pictures, a little more of who we are. Some events that were held. And how can you keep in touch or become a part of our chapter? Sigma, you can go to the Sigma website. You can also go to the Omega Kappa website. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and if you would like to email us, our email is omega.kappa.chapter560@gmail.com. Thank you. So this would end our session for this evening. And see you all on Friday as well as next week. Be safe and take care.
Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.